I want to put my Jeep on portals, but I don't have a lot of money. But luckily I found these Hummer portal boxes on Facebook Marketplace for $1,000 for all 4 of them. So on the front axle, we're looking at $500, $299 for the eBay center section, and about $120 to $140 in tube.
Clearly I'm off to a good start, but the question is, can I build these portal axles for about the same price as it would cost to build a 1-ton axle? I don't know, but I've got a lot of ideas, and now we just need to try them and see if it's actually all gonna work.
The first thing I want to do today is I want to cut these axle tubes and get everything laid out exactly where we want it to match the truck that we're building. But while I'm getting all this laid out, you should check out how I got these pucks made.
These 4 to 9-inch axle center sections are made to accept a 3-inch tube. As you can see, there's a tiny bit of slop in between the tubes and the center section. I have an alignment bar kit. The alignment bar kit should solve all of our problems, but unfortunately, I do have an issue where all these pucks that came with the kit do not fit my application. This is where Total Metal Innovations comes in.
Tyler with Total Metal Innovations, that is a mouthful, told me that if I ever needed any machining work done, I could come down here to Oregon and pay him a visit. These pucks are not something that I can do with my tiny little lathe at home. So Tyler, he's gonna show off this really sweet mill that he's got. We're gonna build some pucks and make it to where when I get back to the shop, we can actually start to assemble this axle, make sure that it's nice and straight.
The cool thing about me having access to Tyler and his equipment is that you do too, meaning that he already drew these pucks up. If you're interested in building an axle like this and you just need a set of pucks to like slide over some 1.5-inch DOM tube, like you don't need an alignment bar. You can totally use some 1.5-inch DOM tube for that. Hit up Tyler. Just shoot him an email, let him know that you watched it on the channel and that you're interested in doing something similar, and he could very easily tweak these dimensions in the computer, cut it out on the mill, and mail it to you.
So check this out. Right there is the edge of the inside of our frame rail. This is the center of our engine bay, center of the whole truck, the whole Jeep. And then 12 inches over here would be the other side of our frame rail. So as you can see, we have a lot less space than you would probably guess. This line right here is where the center line of our pinion is. So the pinion is offset towards the engine. So that means that from the center line of our pinion to the center line of our engine bay is only 9 3/4 inches. That is tight. I'm very glad that we're gonna be going with a very small footprint Volkswagen TDI, and we can clock it. We can clock it a little bit to where the bottom is a little farther away from the pinion. In any case, this is what we're working with. I can't push the diff this way anymore because we're not going to use these axle shafts, but we are going to use the stubs, and we are going to use this joint, this CV. I like the performance of a CV off-road. So what that means is that our tube, which is what I'm trying to figure out how to cut, the tube can't be any farther, it's going to just cut this. So we need the tube to basically stop right at the edge of this, and then from there we'll be able to build our inner C off of the tube. So I'm going to grab a laser so I can mark on the table exactly where this is gonna end up, and then I can pull some measurements on the table to figure out exactly how much to cut.
My background in construction makes it to where I always feel like the best way for my brain to process this stuff is to either draw it on the table or draw it on the floor or something, so that I can see like a 2D representation of exactly what I'm doing. And I find that this makes it much easier to get exact cuts and exact distances exactly where I want them.
So the way we're gonna do this is these fit into the tubes nice and snug. These fit into our third member nice and snug. So I'm gonna zip these in real quick. I'm hoping that the way they built this is in fact true and centered, because if it is, then once we drop this third into here and then we put the tubes in there, we should be able to very easily slide the rod through the entire thing, and it should be completely flat and centered and ready for us to start tack welding stuff together. Well, there it is. It's all fit together. Oh, interesting. There is the tiniest gap between the housing and our third, which means that we will definitely need to run a cork gasket or something in between these two surfaces in order to make sure that everything stays true. I mean, it is probably a 1/16 thick. So a good cork gasket, honestly, I should probably start doing that anyway on my 9-inch housings, because it does suck to pull whenever you've got like super sticky silicone all the way around it.
The welding process for projects like this is so incredibly important, so I put a lot of thought into every single move. The first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the TIG to slowly heat and tack a few different spots to keep everything exactly where I want it. Then I'm going to run like some 1-inch welds on each side and let it cool, and then I'm going to slide the bar in and out to make sure that the bar is still freely sliding in between all 4 of these pucks, because any deflection in our welds is going to show up there. You're going to see that like the bar will get super tight if you're starting to warp a housing. So once I've passed that test, then I'm going to go through and do a root pass with my TIG welder. And the reason that I'm using the TIG for this is it makes a nice low build weld. So my goal with the TIG is to make a watertight seal that after it cools, it will be it'll be extra strength to resist warping whenever I do my really hot cover pass. And I'm going to do the cover pass with my MIG welder. Well, it's the same welder, but I'm going to use MIG as the process, and I'm going to turn the machine all the way up to as hot as it will possibly go.
Rear axle, front axle, and these aren't junkyard axles. These are built right here in my backyard. It's pretty exciting. We built something that is exactly for the vehicle that we are designing, and so these are going to meet our dimensions perfectly. I do want to talk about the welding process. So you'll notice that I started with a root pass with my TIG welder, and that's because when you're using a TIG, for those of you that never have, it's very easy to see if you have any holes in your weld. So because we're able to see that there was no holes in it as I went around, and it's really good for a low build weld, meaning that I was able to basically just heat up the material between the tube and this housing and use that as my filler, it made it to where I had a really nice low build root pass, which makes it easier to cover. Also, another thing about TIG versus MIG is that it's harder to get a really hot TIG weld. It's a lot easier to do a very high penetration MIG weld. This machine can weld up to 3/8 with the MIG welder, and it can only weld about a 1/4 inch with the TIG welder. So we did the root pass. That was the pass that's going to basically confirm that this will hold oil and not leak all over the place. And then we covered it with a MIG. And this is our pass that's going to make it super strong, because a MIG is really good at building nice and high, which you can see here. We're able to fill that completely. And it's got a great ability to put tons of heat into the piece. However, the con of putting tons of heat into the piece is that it could very easily warp, and especially with axle housings, I've found that a lot of people warp them and they don't even realize how bad they warp them. So for that reason, we went back and we annealed the weld with my torch, and we did it with the alignment rod in there, because whenever we anneal it and we cook it with that torch, it reheats up those welds and it helps them relax a little bit. And the idea is that then once it cools with this rod in here, it hopefully relaxed in a way that is going to be, you know, encouraging this to stay nice and straight. So now that this is cold, we can see how easily, oh yeah, see that comes out super easy. So I know that this, well, not easy with one hand, but so now I know that this housing has now cooled down and it's completely square. We have these pucks on the outside and then we have pucks on the inside, and it makes it to where when that bar goes through there, there we go, focus for me. It has 4 points of contact in this axle to make everything nice and straight. So I know this is a long explanation, but I wanted to clear up any confusion as to why we did this and the process that we did it.
Unfortunately, at this point in the project, I have a few very big decisions to make that I have not made yet. I just need more information and more time to like sit here and stew on it. And one is our axle shafts. I need to make a decision on how I'm going to proceed with custom axle shafts for these axles. I want to do it on a budget, but it also needs to be very strong and reliable. I could absolutely just call RCV and get custom ones made, but that is not in my budget. So I am stripping apart the factory Hummer axle shafts in order to get some measurements and compare them to some of the shafts I have laying around. And what I've found is that they are like almost the exact same diameter as a Toyota 80 series Land Cruiser axle shaft. So they're approximately the same axle shaft diameter as a 30 spline axle. I know from experience that with the 80 series Land Cruiser, with just really high quality shafts that are 30 spline, on 39s, I was able to push that truck really hard and I never broke an axle shaft. I also know from experience that with my Jeep TJ, I was able to push that thing super hard with the Dana 44 front axle, and those shafts lasted as a 30 spline as well. I didn't want to do 30 spline on this, but because we have these portal boxes, which is reducing our gearing by 93%, that reduces the amount of twisting force on these axle shafts substantially. So this might be the way that we go. I might get some custom, essentially 36 spline Hummer axle shafts made that would then go to a 31 spline or a 35 spline locker for the Ford 9-inch. I don't have to make this decision yet, but at least have some information to go off of. The next thing that I need to make a decision on is how am I going to get things in alignment. After thinking about it a little bit, I figured out a pretty simple solution.
More machining in this video. I'm here at my buddy John Martinson's place, and we're going to create a way, I've thought about this a lot, to index the center of these housings into the center of our portal boxes.
So we're going to use John's lathe to turn down these factory Hummer stub shafts, essentially. Well, not stub shafts, axle shafts. We're going to cut one in half. We're going to turn it down to where it'll index inside of a piece of 1.5 inch DOM. Then we have 2 extra pucks that I had made when I was down in Oregon that we're going to open up just a little bit to be able to slide over the 1.5 inch DOM, and this should make it to where once I get everything on the table and I key it all into where it belongs, we should have everything, all the centers lined up between the center of my axle housing, the center of the outsides of the axle housing, to the center line of each of these 2 portal boxes.
I was so tempted to use these ball joints off of this Hummer chassis because they fit, and I already own them. I can just cannibalize them for free. But I've got another idea. We're gonna use bolts with bushings instead. I found these bronze bushings at a local hardware store. I think that if you gave this problem to any machinist, this is probably the route they'd tell you to go. So now I need to drill out all these holes.
I'm going to use a 3/4 inch grade 8 bolt for the top joint and a 1 inch grade 8 bolt for the bottom joint. And as far as inner C material thickness, I'm going to go with a 3/4 inch by 2 inch wide. And if you look at the factory, like where the ball joints mount into the control arms, those control arms I've measured are 1/8 inch thick. So I think 3/4 should be plenty, but I might even like throw a little bit more material on top. But I won't know until we just start to build these. I don't have any like drawings. There's nothing for me to really go off of. I'm just kind of looking at how inner Cs are built and designed in the industry, like Spider Tracks and the Jesse Haynes Fabrication ones, and I'm making decisions based on what I'm seeing is out there, and then looking at all the forged inner Cs that I have on like stock axles laying around.
No way. Wow. It's scary though.
Face mask just in case.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It is crazy that we're able to bend 3/4 inch flat bar in this press brake. But I've got 3 press brakes, and after looking at them all, I figured I would try it in this one for one particular reason. This goes into that same shop press and is a 20-ton shop press. But if you check out the length of this lower die, or width or whatever, we're looking at 1 inch. So this is gonna be good for like crisper bends with thinner material, but if we want to bend thicker material, we either need more power or we need a bigger lower die. This is 60 tons worth of jack, so this is a very powerful press brake, but we're still only looking at about 2 inches across the lower die. So this might be able to do it, but I knew it would be harder on the equipment just because it's a smaller lower die. This press brake, if I pull all the lower dies, it's just angle iron, if I pull them all out, we're looking at 4 inches. And because the lower die is so wide, it makes it to where it takes less force in order to make that bend. What's interesting is it's still a relatively crisp bend. It's not too bad. And I definitely think that it looks appropriate for what we're building. I'm sure you've seen me build before, and you know by now that I don't draw anything out. We're starting with what we know and then working through the things that we don't know. I know for sure that I need this axle housing to be in a very good line, in a very true line to this portal box. I know that this portal box needs to be aligned at a 90-degree angle. I know that I want big beefy joints between the housing and the portal box. And I know that those joints are gonna need to connect to big beefy material. The portal box is already beefy enough. It's a big, thick cast hole that we can put our bolt through. And this is big and beefy. It's 3/4 inch. I wanted to go 1 inch, but when I was ordering 1 inch, I changed my mind last minute and I decided to go 3/4 because 3/4 is easier for me to work with. And then what I think I'm gonna end up doing is once we get some of this stuff glued together, because again, we're just going from what we know to what we don't know. I know that I want basically a 3/4 inch skeleton here. And then I know that we'll start figuring out some gusseting. But what I don't know is if I'm gonna double this up. I don't think it's necessary when you look at how thin the material is on the Hummer A-arms. And that's just a ball joint just sandwiched through. And it looks like 3/16 or maybe even a little bit thinner. So I think 3/4 will probably be enough, but I will make that call as we build this. So now we're going through a bunch of stuff that I don't know and I can't predict, which is basically I'm just gonna start taking cardboard, cutting it, taping it up, and try to find shapes that I think are gonna be strong and shapes that I think are gonna look good. And then once we get all that established, I can start to cut plate and glue it together. As someone who's never built inner Cs or even like really seen it built. My strategy here is to just build the best gusseting system that I can. So with gussets, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it to where there's no point of like tons and tons of tension. We're trying to like take that amount of force and we're trying to spread that out as far as possible, and then maybe even spread that out and throw another gusset on top of the first one. So between gussets and fish plates and some well thought out welding practices, I think that we can throw something together that's gonna be pretty strong. Again, this TJ came with like a Dana 30 front axle and a Dana 44 rear, and for a long time I just had an old school Dana 44 front, and I never bent to C, and the C's were made out of way less material than we're gonna be throwing at this. So I think that all we have to do is proceed with caution. I'm gonna trust my gut the best that I can, because again, not an engineer. And if you are an engineer and you see this final product and you have some suggestions on how to improve it, I'm all ears. Let me know in the comments section.
Dude, check it out. It's starting to look like an axle now. So we have so far to go. I'm letting things cool down. We're gonna weld this slow. And there's some things that I wanna do as I'm welding to make sure that we don't get too much warpage going on. But I know I'm gonna get questions about plans on getting this nice and strong. So we're gonna have a gusset that's gonna go right over the top here. Because we have a boot that goes all the way back to here, I didn't want things to get too close. But if we bend something in this shape, it should give us the space that we need and give us the strength that we need. And then on top of that gusset, I'm gonna use this this coilover bracket from Barnes 4-wheel drive, and it's gonna go like right there. Boom, coilover mount. Coilover mount. I'm probably gonna do lower control arms. Well, let's see. Inside edge of frame rail was right here. So I want my lower control arms. We might put 2 tabs here. I don't know. We're gonna do a truss across the top here and then across the top to here to give us a lot of resistance to these kinds of forces. And then I would like to do a truss, which sucks, is that the kind of truss that I want to do, it's very easy to warp. But I would like to do a backbone truss. So again, where's my little piece of paper? Imagine this guy right here, and then the truss will lay over the top of this gusset and then slowly work its way up to the level of this housing. And then the same thing on the other side. We'll have a gusset right there, and then the truss will go down onto the gusset. So between having a little gusset down here, little gusset down here, truss on top, truss on back, this should be a pretty strong unit. And then of course, once we get the bulk of the welding done and I feel like everything is straight, I mean, I'm probably going to do more annealing to make sure that whenever we unbolt from the portal box, things don't just like spring and mess up the whole project. But once we get to that point and we pull the housing off, then I can box the whole inside of these inner C's. I feel like there should be some sort of a disclaimer here. This is something that is not what you should do. This is my journey to just challenge myself and try to build something inexpensive that I think is going to work well. But if it blows up in my face, it's my money and my risk. This is not like a normal fab project, and this has huge consequences. I just want to throw that out there. Also, I'm doing a lot to save a little. So for those of you that are interested in doing the Hummer portals, I would highly recommend just checking out the Jesse Haynes fabrication stuff. You can buy the inner C's that are already built. He's already built a ton of them, and they're built mass produced. So he has jigs and everything to make sure that everything is exactly the way you want it. I mean, consider this the R&D phase. So this would be like the first step if I was going to do that, which I'm not. I'm not interested in selling stuff. I just want to build cool shit in my garage and share it with people who are interested. It's a nice day. I am going to throw this edit together and hang out with my kids. So I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next one. A quick bonus for those of you that are waiting for content from the other channel, the Dirt Lifestyle Hunt and Homestead. I did finish the greenhouse. I have a few topic videos coming up. Probably launch next month. I'm trying to get caught up on a bunch of things, but check it out. Greenhouse is, I don't know, 98% done. My tomatoes are crushing it right now, and it's only May. So, anyway, look for that content to be rolling in on the Dirt Lifestyle Hunt and Homestead channel.